In our study of the schemes and tropes, we have up till now covered certain devices which come under the tropes and certain devices which come under the heading of schemes. And we linked them with the devices utilized for the sake of creating parallelism, which are schemes, and the devices which create deviations, which are tropes. And they all come under the broader heading of foregrounding. As we now understand that certain figurative devices, literary devices or figures of speech or stylistic devices are employed by the writers for the sake of bringing something to the forefront. Either a writer chooses to make use of parallel structures or schemes to create deviation or foregrounding from the normal or expected patterns of speech and writing, or he may choose to deviate or challenge the existing norms of writing and speech. We in our last few lectures have covered the schemes and tropes which appear repeatedly in literary writings, especially poetry. We have looked at the figures which involve repetition, and the repetition occurs at two levels, at the level of sound and also at the level of words. A writer, through the repetition of words and sounds, creates parallelism or parallel structure where there is symmetry, order, balance, rhyme, which aids to memorability. Apart from aiding the memorability, the use of schemes, which are the figures of repetition, also helps to emphasize a point or an idea. A writer, through repetition, emphasizes something that he considers important or something that in his text he wants to foreground. We also looked at figures involving semantic irregularities, that how meanings are enhanced or changed or challenged with the use of figurative devices. In it, we looked at figures like metaphor, personification, conceit, and all these figures reveal that the word stands for some more larger, broader, and deeper meaning, which is metaphoric and symbolic meaning as well, which might appear unusual, different, and unbelievable on the surface. But on a closer scrutiny and understanding, the reader realizes the similarity between the two things which have been compared. We also looked at the figures involving comparison. We also looked at figures involving substitution or change, and also the figures which are figures of amplification and addition. So from among all these figures, today we will look at the last group of figures which involve substitution. Now, these figures which involve substitution are metonymy, synecdoche, irony, sarcasm, symbol. All these figures reveal that they involve replacement of one thing for another. Now, the first two, which are called metonymy and synecdoche, these are a bit tricky, but their understanding and analysis with the help of examples would reveal the differences and also would make it easier for us to understand what they both stand for and what are the specific places or purposes where they are used. From among the figures involving substitution or change, let us first look at metonymy. Metonymy is a trope. As tropes invert meaning, it is one of the tropes which changes meaning or replaces meaning. In this trope, metonymy, that is, one entity or a thing is used to stand for another. So in metonymy, we substitute one thing for another, one object for another. It means that the change of a word naming an object for another word closely associated with it. So we replace the word which actually should be used with what it is closely related to. So it is replacement of one suitable and closely connected word which can be substituted for another in writing, that is used for the sake of creating effect of you can say uniqueness or effect of sort of a bit sort of challenge for the reader, that he has to sort after, or he has to find out what is the thing that is being referred to. The word metonymy has been derived from two words, meta and onoma. Meta means change, and onoma means name. So we change name, we change places of names, either nouns or objects too. It's also referred to as a substitution of some attributive or suggestive word for what it is, really it means. For example, if we refer to the word crown for royalty, or we use the word brass for military, or pen for a writer, that is what metonymy is. For example, if we say that in a meeting all the top brass of the country were present. Now the top brass is a reference to the higher ranked military officers. Now instead of saying that the generals or the higher ranked military officers attended a meeting, the newscaster would announce that the top brass of the country attended a meeting. Now the word brass is replacing the military officers, as it is something that is closely connected to them. So the medals and the brass that they carry on their chest is what their rank as generals have been replaced with. And if we use the statement that thousands of pens cannot express what Shakespeare's writing has expressed. Now, in this statement, instead of saying that thousands of writers cannot express what Shakespeare has expressed in the plays, we are replacing the word writers with the word pen. So pen is what a writer is closely connected with. It is a indispensable, a vehicle or a weapon for a writer. So replacing the word writer with pen and replacing the word general with top brass is what is referred to as metonymy. In metonymy, we replace the original word with what it is closely connected with. It is a figure of speech which involves the substitution or replacement of one noun for another, of which it is an attribute or which is closely associated with it. For example, if we say that the kettle is boiling, go and make tea. Now, we don't really mean that the kettle is boiling, we mean to say that the water that is contained in the kettle is boiling. But instead of saying that the water in the kettle is boiling, we say kettle is boiling. Or we may also say that he drank a cup. Now we mean to say that he drank the water in the cup or the tea in the cup, but we replace the word tea with the word cup, saying that he drank it. So it is a noun where a noun is substituted for a noun in which in such a way that we substitute the cause of the thing of which we are speaking for the thing itself. And this might be done in several ways. For example, we can substitute the inventor for his invention. We can replace author with his work. For example, if I say that I'm reading Shakespeare, now I do not mean to say that I'm reading Shakespeare. I in fact mean to say that I'm reading Shakespeare's works, either his play or his poem. So I may say that I'm reading Shakespeare. Or we may say that we find this theme in Milton. We do not mean to say that we find this theme in Milton's self. We mean to say that we find these themes in the works of Milton. Or we may substitute the container for the thing contained within it. The way we said that kettle is boiling, we mean to say the thing contained within the container, the kettle is boiling, but we replaced it with the kettle. Or we say he drank the cup, instead of saying he drank the milk. So this is metonymy. In the use of metonymy, we replace one thing with something that it is closely connected with. And the example is military is replaced with brass and writers replaced with pen. So these examples, if you remember this with example, that the example of metonymy is that pen is mightier than the sword. Now here the word pen is mightier than the sword. The word pen and sword represent publishing and military force respectively. Instead of saying that army is mightier than the journalists or the writers, we say that otherwise that the pen is mightier than the army, or the journalists or the writers are mightier than the army. So pen is metonymy, because instead of saying that the writers or publishers or intellectuals, we are using the word pen, which is closely connected to the writers or the publishers. And instead of saying army or military, we are using the word sword, which they historically have been related to. Now the army doesn't really use the sword, they use weapons like guns, but since it is historically connected, so we say so. As in metonymy, the word that triggers an association is historically connected, or is a historical reality. The way the word sword has been over the period of time have become a symbol of the army or the military. So pen and sword represent publishing and military, hence they are metonymy, because here they replace the original word military and writer with sword and pen. So if you remember one example with metonymy, you will be able to locate it in your text, or you will be able to find out more examples of metonymy. So try to remember one example like pen is mightier than the sword as the very iconic example of metonymy. Now let us move to the second figure of speech, that is a figure of substitution or another trope. So synecdoche, the word synecdoche, that is also like metonymy, used for replacing one object, one thing for another, but there are different conditions for the use of metonymy. We use metonymy in different situations and cases as compared to synecdoche. In synecdoche, we replace one word with another on the basis of its association, on the basis of its close connection. But here in synecdoche, there are a few conditions. For example, a part stands for a whole. For example, hand representing the whole being. For example, if we say that give me your hand, lend me your hand, we want somebody's help. We want somebody's whole being to come and aid us. We don't just need his or her hand, but we say so, that give me your hand, I need to take this load out of the car. So instead of saying come here for my help, I'm saying give me your hand. Similarly, somebody may say that in marriage they ask for the girl's hand. Now they are not really asking for the girl's hand, rather they are asking for the whole girl. But as it is a synecdoche, it is used to refer to part, that is the substitute for the whole. So we are substituting the whole person with the hand. So it may also use individual, which may stand for a class. Individual standing for a class, that is representing a group, a student or a teacher. And then there might also be reference to a material that may stand for a thing. A material stands for a thing. For example, if I say that you're wearing a nice fleece, you're wearing nice tweed. Now I'm not saying that your coat is nice or your suit is nice. Rather, I'm referring to the very material that the suit or the coat is made of. For example, if the coat is made of tweed or fleece, I admire the fabric, I admire the material that it is made of. So material stands for the thing. So your coat is referred to as fleece. Fleece is the very fabric or the very wool that it is made up of. So I am replacing it in my reference with the material. Rather, referring to the coat or the thing, I am naming the material. So it is synecdoche. In synecdoche, there is a relationship of one thing with another. When we say that synecdoche has such use where there is a relationship of one thing with another, that relationship would be part-whole relationship, as that of hand with the body. That also might be the relationship of material and thing. For example, thing is the coat, material is the wool, the fleece, or the tweed. So if I say that, for example, lend me your ears, I do not mean to say that you literally, take off your ears and hand it over to me. I mean to say that give me your attention, look at me, listen to me. So I want your whole being to concentrate on what I'm saying. But here as synecdoche, I'm referring to the ears only, because the ears are part-whole relationship with mind and body. So ears, lending ears means giving the whole concentration, attention to a person. Similarly, giving a hand means giving the help to somebody. Synecdoche is such a figure of speech in which a part of something represents the whole thing. So keep it in mind that in synecdoche there is a part-whole relationship, whereas in metonymy one thing replaces another, one thing which has close connection with it. For example, in synecdoche, the heads of horses might substitute for the whole horses. Just the way we say in the class, a teacher might say that count the heads. Now counting the head means count the students, how many students are present in the class. But using a synecdoche, a teacher might say count the heads, or count the hands which have been raised by the students. Now counting the heads or hands does not mean that we separate the hand from the person, but since it is synecdoche, it is substituting the hand or head with the body or the person. The examples from literature that can be extracted of synecdoche can be, Emily Dickinson uses synecdoche in her poem that she says, I surmised the horses' heads were towards eternity. In that poem where she says, I could not stop for that, he kindly stopped for me. So in that poem, she makes use of this statement that I surmised the horses' heads were towards eternity. Now, she doesn't mean that she is traveling only on the horse's head. Of course, she is traveling, on the whole horse in a cart, but the head is replacing the whole being or body of the horse. Just the way we say that lend me your hand, here she has used synecdoche referring to only the heads of the horses which are in the front moving or looking towards the sky or eternity. She says that I first believed that the horses are moving towards eternity, not just the horses' heads, but here for the sake of you can say uniqueness and novelty that is added to the poem, she makes use of the heads only, and as such it is a synecdoche. In Ulysses by James Joyce, and that in another poem that is by Tennyson, Ulysses, Tennyson refers to Ulysses' companions as free hearts and free foreheads. Now, instead of saying the companions or the soldiers or the disciples, he refers to free heads and free hearts, which is again part-whole relationship. The relationship of a companion or the subordinate with the hands and heads, which he is referring to as free hearts and free foreheads. Though over here he is referring to the whole person, the whole being, but using a synecdoche he replaces the whole person with the part, that is the forehead and the hearts. Similarly, the use of synecdoche can also be found in Dr. Faustus by Marlowe, the Renaissance writer, dramatist of tragedies. Marlowe in his tragedy Dr. Faustus makes use of this statement that is about the Helen, that is about her beauty and how her beauty has cast a spell or made Faustus wonder. He says, was this the face that launched 1,000 ships and burned the topless stars of Ilium? Now, was this the face? Here the word the face is synecdoche, because instead of saying was this the lady, was this the woman who launched 1,000 ships and burned the topless tars of ilium, he uses the word face, as face is reflective of that woman's beauty or personality. That is why he is making use of the synecdoche to emphasize the beauty or the personality of the woman who has brought about this much change in their time and history. So this is what synecdoche is, where a writer makes use of a part to represent the whole. It might have a relationship of you can say material and thing, like instead of saying that you're wearing nice glasses, rather we say, instead of saying that you are wearing good sunglasses or spectacles, somebody would say just glasses, because glasses are what is the material that your spectacles are made of. Similarly, if somebody says that you're wearing a good a tweed, you're wearing good silk, now we mean to say that the shirt or the suit or the coat is nice, rather than the material that it is made up of. So material for the thing and part for the thing. This is the relationship of synecdoche, where one thing replaces another, whereas in metonymy we see that there is a close connection of one thing with another. We replace or substitute one noun for another, which it is an attribute of. Now, as synecdoche and metonymy are the two figures or tropes of substitution, where one thing replaces another, let us move to some other tropes or figures of speech which change meaning, which replace meaning, which invert meaning. Now, one of such devices which is very effectively used by the writers in literature is called irony. Irony is one such device which changes meaning, which substitutes meaning, or even it amplifies meaning. Irony means the discrepancy or difference between what is said and what is intended, what is apparent and what is really happening, what is believed and what is really the reality. So irony operates on these many levels. There is verbal irony, situational irony, dramatic irony, or so on. There are many types of irony. So irony means the discrepancy or difference between what is said and what is meant, what is said and what is intended, what is meant and what others understand, and also what is done or what happens and what others expect. So let us look at several types of irony, as irony can be of situation, it can also be dramatic irony, and also can be verbal irony. Situational irony is when the expectations aroused by a situation are reversed. For example, in situational irony, the characters, the people might be expecting one outcome, whereas something opposite to their expectations happens. Now, there are many examples of situational irony in the plays as well as in the novels. If you people had read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, there you find many examples of situational irony. In Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, we find that when the family of Mr. Bennet, especially his daughters, are expecting to enjoy a ball, and they expect that Jane, their eldest daughter, would be engaged to Bingley, and that Elizabeth thinks that she would find the military officer Wickham there as somebody whom she can really relate to. So these expectations which the Bennet daughters had from the ball were not really met. They were thwarted or they were dismissed by the situation, as Wickham doesn't show up at the ball against the expectations of the Bennet daughters, and Bingley could not really, relate to Jane, because Jane's mother cuts a sorry figure by exaggeration or by boasting about Jane's engagement, which hasn't yet been announced. So this is the example of situational irony, where the characters expected that things would be tied, relationships would be made, positivity would follow. But the situation reveals that what the characters expected is not going to happen, and something opposite to that happens. They feel disappointed after that ball, which they had quite, positive, with which they had quite positive hopes. So this is the very simple example of situational irony, where in a drama or in a novel or in maybe a poem as well, the characters' expectations are thwarted and they are dismissed. Another famous and most prominent example of irony is dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is different from situational irony, as in dramatic irony, as it is associated with the performance of drama, you can relate it more closely to the drama where the characters are aware of what is happening, whereas you can notice that the second type of irony is dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is used where we find that the audience is aware of more facts than the character itself. So in a play or in a novel where the characters are unaware of what is happening and the audience knows the answers, the audience knows the situation more than the characters, so such irony is referred to as dramatic irony. The example of dramatic irony is that you see in Pride and Prejudice when Lady Catherine goes to Elizabeth's house to stop her from accepting Darcy's proposal. So Lady Catherine goes to Elizabeth to stop her from accepting Darcy's proposal, whereas she doesn't know that Darcy hasn't yet proposed to her and that Elizabeth has no idea that she has been proposed. So the readers know. As a reader, we know that Darcy is about to propose Elizabeth, and that he would do by going to her father directly rather than to her. So either the characters are unaware, or the major person who is the instrumental, as Lady Catherine, is unaware of the fact that this is about to happen. So Elizabeth is unaware of the fact that Darcy is going to propose to her, that he would meet her father. And Lady Catherine thinks that he has already proposed her and she has her consent given to him about the acceptance of the proposal. So such is the dramatic irony. In the play, that is the classical play Oedipus Rex, we also find the use of dramatic irony, where the audience knows that Oedipus is the murderer of his own father. So the audience knows that Oedipus, the king himself, is the culprit. He is the murderer of his own father, whereas Oedipus himself has announced death sentence for the man who has killed his father, not knowing that it is he himself. So these are the examples of situational irony, where the audience or the reader knows the reality and a character is blind, character is unaware of the reality. So dramatic irony is a very significant tool for the sake of creating interest, for the sake of creating, you can say, readers' curiosity for the play or the novel. Apart from situational irony and dramatic irony, the third type of irony is verbal irony. Verbal irony is when a character says something but means the opposite of it. So if the words have ironic connotations, or the words have ironic or double meanings, here we say that we are making use of verbal irony. For example, if somebody says that you are very smart, now the word smart is usually understood in the context that we are praising somebody, but sometimes we want to use a little sarcasm or a taunt to really say that somebody is trying to be over clever, so we may use the same word. So verbal irony is when there is difference between what is said and what is intended. So the intention might be to satirize, to criticize, or to condemn, whereas the words might be very much soft, or that it might look like a praise, whereas we mean to say something else. We find many examples of verbal irony in Pride and Prejudice, as well as the whole novel is based on the use of irony on words as well as in the situation. We see that in the very first statement that Darcy makes about Elizabeth, he says that Elizabeth is tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt me. Now these very words are uttered by Darcy. On seeing Elizabeth, he dismisses her, saying that she is tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt me. Whereas the reader knows the irony of the words. The reader is aware of the verbal irony, that the woman whom he is dismissing as unworthy or not so smart would be the only woman who he would find to be smart enough to be his wife. So he would propose to her. And Elizabeth also replies to that comment, saying that Darcy would be the last man on earth whom she could ever be prevailed on to marry. So when she says that Darcy is the last man whom I could ever be prevailed on to marry, that statement is also termed by the reader as example of verbal irony, because what she is saying now is what she would change later, and he would be the only man whom she would ever like to be married to, or would give kind of approval for marriage. So these are the examples of verbal irony where what is intended is denied later, or what is meant is something else that is behind the scene or behind the words or the lines. So irony is of these many types that recurs in literary writings, plays, poetry, as well as in drama. Situational irony is when the expectations are thwarted. What we expect from a situation or a happening or incident, but the characters expect from the happening or the incident is not what really happens at the end. Dramatic irony is when the audience knows the reality and the character is unaware. In verbal irony, what is said is not what is meant, or what is said is later something that is proven to be wrong. So irony is the very useful device or effective device to create even humor, or to reveal the intentions of the human heart and mind. It is also a useful device to satirize or to criticize or to comment upon the human follies or human idiosyncrasies and attitudes as well. So writers use irony to make the reader feel more interested in the text, because irony complicates the meanings, because all the time irony has got hidden or double meanings, as it is inversion, as it changes meaning or inverts meaning. So as a reader, we are supposed to be engaged with the text more critically and observe what is said. For example, the examples that I have mentioned for irony mostly comprise of play and novel. As I looked at Pride and Prejudice with respect to situational irony and verbal irony, and also I looked at Oedipus Rex, the play by Sophocles, for explaining dramatic irony. If you want to have an example of irony from poetry, you will find such examples replete in the dramatic monologues of Robert Browning. For instance, take the dramatic monologue of Robert Browning, that is My Last Duchess. Now, My Last Duchess makes use of such expressions which are ironic. For example, the writer, the persona explaining about his last duchess to the imagery or the ambassador of a neighboring country states that this is my last duchess painted on the wall. Now, the idea of the duchess last Duchess painted on the wall has got ironic connotations that the Duchess is dead now, and now she exists only in the form of painting. She is not alive. She has ceased to exist. That is why she has been painted on the wall. And also he says that then I ordered and all the smiles stopped. So when the persona in My Last Duchess says to the ambassador of the next neighboring country that then I ordered and all smiles stopped, gives us the irony of the words that smiles stopped means that he gave the order of her death, that she must be killed, and this is what stopped the smiles. And the more inherent irony of the situation that the reader guesses is that the speaker seems to be revealing to the imagery or the ambassador everything about the last Duchess, that what kind of a lady she was, that she was indiscriminate in her smiles and her love to everyone that she met in the court. So this is what ignites jealousy in the Duke, and that jealousy is what made him order for the murder of the Duchess. Now the Duke doesn't reveal that he ordered the murder because of jealousy, but the verbal and situational irony is what helps the reader to understand that instead of revealing what the Duchess was like, the Duke is revealing his own self-centeredness, his own egoistic nature, as well as his own jealousy and sense of possession, that he cannot really let that lady live the way she wanted to and had seized everything in her life because of his intrusion into her life, and finally ordered for the murder too. Now this is referred to as situational irony, where we understand that the imagery would not be happy. The way the persona is trying to please the imagery so that he can marry the Duchess of their country, the imagery would get an understanding of the horrible and most detestable personality of the Duke that reveals possessiveness and self-interestedness and pride as well. Similarly, there is dramatic irony, as reader knows that the Duke has ordered for the murder of his own Duchess, and now he wants to remarry to the princess of the neighboring country, whose imagery is now visiting the Duke's palace. So even in stories and poems you understand the situational irony, or you find situational irony, but situational irony, verbal irony, dramatic irony is a bit tricky to be located. Why? Because it is a more intellectual way of a writer to render to the reader some reality that if exposed openly would lose its charm. So that is why a very engaging, intellectual and more sophisticated mind is required, or more application of the mind is required for the sake of exposing or understanding and comprehending the types of irony which are embedded or are inherent within a text. Now, apart from irony, another way of amplifying the meaning or substituting the meaning or changing the meaning or enhancing the meaning is through sarcasm and satire. We often come across these terms, sarcasm. Somebody's sarcastic remark is that we get offended with, or we really feel hurt. Similarly, sarcasm is used for politicians or such people who expose themselves through maybe corruption or ill manners. Similarly, satire is used by the writers for the sake of reforming a situation or people or individuals. Now let us look. What are both these terms? What do they refer to? How are they used by the writers? First, let us look at sarcasm, as sarcasm is one kind of irony. So, sarcasm is a kind of irony, as it praises which is in fact an insult. So, in sarcasm, you praise something, but in fact you literally mean to insult somebody or to expose somebody. Sarcasm generally involves an insult, a malice, or a desire to put something or someone down. For example, if a mother says, "This is my brilliant son who failed out of college." Now the mother is not praising the son. The mother, out of her anger, is sarcastic, and she is insulting the son for his failure to pass the exam. So she says, "This is my brilliant son. This is the son of the business tycoon who has failed in the exam." Now that sort of an expression is what would make the listener feel ashamed of his act. So that is why it is meant to be an insult. If we say that the grand empire seems to have nothing for its people who are without electricity, so the superpower or the sort of nuclear power doesn't have electricity to supply to its majority of the people. So in these expressions, the reporter or the news reporter means to, to be sarcastic, that he is insulting, or he is in fact exposing some brutality or the harsh reality. So to remember sarcasm, you must remember that it appears to be a praise outwardly, but inwardly, between the lines, the writer has meant to insult some person, idea, institution, or whatever. Now, similar to sarcasm, another type of inversion of meaning is through irony, that is, use of satire. Now, satire is generally referred to as exposing vices, follies of an individual, group, society, even theory or idea or institution as well. And the intention is to reform it. The intention is that exposing those vices through satire would help us see our own picture or reality as if we see a mirror. So a writer uses satire for the sake of exposing what is considered to be hidden from the people. He exposes the reality. So a satirist frequently makes use of irony. So satire also depends upon use of irony. So in satire, we expose the reality, we expose the weaknesses and follies or vices of a person, institution, group, society, people, or even a theory or idea as well, and for the sake of correcting it. And a satirist may use irony too to expose anything. So these are the devices which we refer to as devices used for the sake of substitution, which include metonymy, that is replacing one thing with something that it is connected to or associated to, like brass for the military. Second one was synecdoche, which has got part, whole relationship or material thing relationship, like coat, like tweed for coat, and hand for the whole person. Then we looked at irony, which is of many types: verbal irony, situational irony, and the irony that is dramatic irony. Closely associated with irony are sarcasm and satire. Sarcasm is praise, which intends to be an insult. Satire is exposure of vices with the use of irony or ironic connotations. Apart from these, there is another figure for substitution or a device of substitution that is referred to as symbolism. We study it with the irony because these are what are repeatedly used by the writers in literary writings. Symbolism is the systematic or creative use of arbitrary symbols as abstract representations or concepts of objects and distinct relationships in between, as they define both context and narrower definition of terms. Now, a symbol has got an association with what it is replaced with. For example, if I say that she's she is defined to be as white and pale. Now, being white and pale refers to maybe disease or death. Now, it has been referred to with the symbol of the color white or the color that is yellow or pale. So, in a narrower context, symbolism is applied use of any iconic representations which carry particular conventional meaning. Now, if there is an iconic symbol, iconic in the sense that which has been used historically or which has been popularly used by people and everyone recognizes that as so. For example, in the East, owl is the symbol of stupidity and silliness. If we use that word for a person, we mean to say that somebody is dumb or somebody is silly or stupid or lacks intelligence. But owl is a symbol of wisdom in the West. When it is used over there in the West, they mean to use it for the sake of praising somebody for his intellect, for his knowledge, for his wisdom. So here, a simple bird becomes a symbol of something that is knowledge in the West, and in the East it is ignorance. Similarly, colors can also be used as symbols, like the color red may signify love and passion, or the color red may also signify danger, death, as it's a symbol of blood too. Similarly, blue may signify peace, serenity. White may symbolize peace and simplicity and chastity, and similar sentiments or emotions or attributes and characteristics. The animals or birds also are symbolic. For example, dove symbolizes peace and innocence. Fox symbolizes greed and cunning, or pig symbolizes gluttony and appetite or lust. So these are the ways we use certain iconic representations as symbols. A writer may choose to create symbols of his own in a work. For example, if you people have read Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, in that novel, Conrad makes use of the symbol of ivory. Ivory that is collected from the elephants and hippos' tusks is referred to as a white substance that symbolizes greed and lust and materialism and money-mindedness of the Europeans. Similarly, he also refers to the office of the colonial empire in Belgium as Whited Sepulchre. Now, that office of the Belgian Empire as Whited Sepulchre is a symbol of a tomb, that is the place of is a grave of people where the dead bodies are buried. Now it symbolizes death and decay. So a writer may choose anything, a creative way to symbolize one thing or another. A symbol might represent an institution, a symbol might reveal corruption, a symbol might reveal an attribute, feeling, emotion of a person. So these are the various ways that writers make use of various symbols in a text or in a writing, either in poetry or in plays. In poetry, you come across many symbols in many poems. If you want to consider the examples of symbols from poetry, consider Robert Frost's poem. For example, in the poem Mending Walls, the wall symbolizes divisions, separations that are there. The wall is a material thing made up of bricks between two neighbors or two houses or two countries or two states. But the material thing, wall, stands for anything that is a grudge, that is a separation, that is a division, that is the lack of communication that might exist between two people. Then in the apple picking, apples, their red color, their aroma, their fragrance is a symbol of, you can say, dreams, beauty, youth, desires. So the apples represent the unfulfilled or forbidden desires too for a young person or for the man who is dreaming of apples and their aroma and their taste, and also the orchards that he is collecting the apples from. So In another poem of Robert Frost, we see that he refers to the road. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I chose the one less traveled by. Now, in that poem, the road is the symbol of the life, and life brings to us many choices where we have to choose one thing over another. Two things might be tempting at the same time, but a choice has to be made between the two. So the road is the path of life, the journey of life, and a road that has a diversion or a fork represents the choices that a person comes across in life. So in a symbol, the literal sense of the meaning is transferred to a metaphoric or a symbolic sense, where you look at one thing as meaning something more or something greater. So this is how symbols work in poetry and in novels. They enhance the meaning, they magnify the prospects of a situation or a narrower situation which has been created by the writer. Now the poem Road Not Taken is not about going out on a journey, finding two paths and choosing one path over another and going on forever. Now it means anything that is more abstract, like choices in life, choice of career, choice of choosing a partner in life, choice of changing your self from one kind of a person to another, your personality, your attitude. So all the choices are represented with the help of the choice of one road over another. So this is what symbols refer to. They might be iconic or might have religious, political, historical significance. They might be associated with colors and their connotations. They might be even having political, religious connotations too, and the writer might choose to create a symbol which he has developed through the context within a poem or within a novel. Now, as these were the devices which are the devices of substitution, synecdoche, metonymy, irony, sarcasm, satire, and also symbol. They all come under the broader fifth category of the figures of speech that we looked at and termed as figures of substitution, as one thing is substituted with another. Now, we will spend a few minutes to understand some more random and more repeatedly used symbols, metaphors, or such ideas which may have a different name or unusual name which you might not have heard before, but they are used by the authors in their works repeatedly. So we'll have a glance of about 3 or 4 more devices which do not come under those categories of substitution or amplification or even semantic irregularities, but are studied separately. So one such figure is chiasmus. The name is a bit difficult, but what it means would be simple to identify. For example, chiasmus is such a figure of speech which inverts what is said in the first clause or part of a sentence. So it is a type of a device used to create parallelism. So it is a scheme. Chiasmus is a figure of speech that belongs to the schemes where a writer wishes to create balance within the text, and it is based on inverted parallelism. It is a rhetorical figure in which two clauses are related to each other through a reversal of a term in order to make a larger point or in order to make some sort of emphatic point. Chiasmus is also sometimes called reverse parallelism. So a very simple way to remember what is chiasmus is to remember that it is reverse parallelism. What is said in the first clause or part of a sentence is reversed in the second. For example, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Now, what is said in the first part has been inverted. Ask not what your country can do for you, rather do what you can do for your country, is a sort of inversion, or you can say reversal of what was said in the first clause or part of the statement. For example, Oscar Wilde has said, life imitates art far more than art imitates life. Now, life imitates art, and then art imitates life, is the inversion of what has been said in the first chunk. So this is chiasmus, where the idea expressed in the first clause or part of a statement or sentence is reversed or is inverted in the second. Look at a few more examples of chiasmus, where we see, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. Or, ask not what you can do for your country, ask what you can do for your country. So in this example also, which says ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Or is another example can be of Keats's poem. He says, beauty is truth, truth beauty. Fair is foul, foul is fair, by Shakespeare. So we find many examples of such thing where a writer perplexes an idea. He gives a kind of, sort of torment to the mind of the reader, where what he said earlier is what he inverts or denies in the second. So when Keats says beauty is truth, truth beauty, so we really are surprised that he said beauty is truth, and then he's saying truth is beauty. So he's replacing something with what he has said earlier. Similarly, Shakespeare says fair is foul and foul is fair. Or whoever sheds the blood of a man, by man shall his blood be shed. So this is a thought-provoking idea that a writer wishes the reader to concentrate on. That is why some thought or an idea is reversed or is inverted in the second part or the second half of a statement. So to remember chiasmus, just remember one clue, that chiasmus is reverse parallelism. So if you remember that it's a reverse parallelism, it will be easier for you to identify that it reverses what is said in the first clause or the statement in the second statement. Chiasmus might be difficult to remember, but to remember reverse parallelism won't be that difficult. So remember one example for chiasmus, that beauty is truth, truth beauty. So you will never gonna forget it, and it will be easier to even identify, locate, or even find more examples of from the literary writings, either poems or plays. So chiasmus is a figure of speech that is based on reverse or inverted parallelism, where what is said in the first part is denied or kind of inverted in the second, like life imitates art far more than art imitates life. So in today's lecture, we looked at figures of substitution, where we analyzed how a writer, for the sake of creating novelty, for the sake of creating sort of surprise for the reader, might not choose to stick to the usual words and things which he is familiar and repeatedly been reading about. So he would make use of a part-whole relationship, material-thing relationship, or he may make use of satire, sarcasm, irony, symbol, in order to present more larger and broader ideas. And this is where the beauty of literary text lies, that instead of saying something straightforwardly, instead of expressing ideas and things simply before the reader, the way we come across in our discussions and talk, the literary artists find novel, unique, and more intricate ways of expressing these. And where do they find a way to express something intricately and artistically? It is the use of literary devices. And we covered, for the understanding of schemes and tropes, such devices like figures of repetition, figures involving semantic irregularity, we looked at figures involving comparison, we looked at figures involving substitution, and we also analyzed figures of amplification and addition. So these are broader headings under which some figures have been put. So in the next class or lecture, we will look at such figures which may not be belonging to any of these categories, but they are also very important for the study of schemes and tropes. So we are left with just a few more devices or figures of speech. We will study them again or with the help of examples from text, so that you remember what they are, what is their use, and how are they employed by the artists in their literary writings. Thank you so much.